Our next speaker, Maike Klip, is very interesting, going on with the theme of obscure facts about our lovely speakers. Maike is a rower. She's very good at it, by the way. Amateur, she says, but her team, Babes with Blades, are number 2 in the Netherlands right now. So give it up for our very talented rower, Maike Klip, who will be talking about service design and front-end interaction.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is the first time that I was introduced as a rower, but however, I'm going to talk about working in government, a bit less sexy than rowing, I must confess. So today I'd like to talk to you about when you're working in design or tech, you're actually working in politics. First, let me introduce myself properly. So my name is Maike Klip. I already posted my slides online. If you want to read along, you can. It's on the Twitter. So I started as a student journalism. I worked a long time as a freelancer. And a couple of years ago, I became, in Dutch, we call it an ambtenaar, a civil servant. And as you can see, that has been quite an identity change for me. I started out as a user researcher at the Executive Agency for Education. In Dutch, it's better known as DUO. Students call it like Ome Duo, Uncle Duo. And I was one of the first UX researchers there. That can be very excited because as one of the first, you can design what the rules should be and how you should operate. So my job is not really on what's on the screen and what happens there, but it's more like what happens around the screen. So I must confess, I have a bit of an imposter syndrome because I don't know anything about CSS, but still here I am talking to a room full of CSSers on a CSS conference. But I'm hoping that I can get you all a bit out of the screens and look at the world around that, and to see how users experience those screens. But of course, we are at CSS Day, so I'm gonna indulge you. Let's start looking at some screens. Oh. My car is in maintenance, so that is I just clicked him away, and now my presentation went. Wait. Okay, where did it go? Is this the keynote? Yeah, this is the keynote. Let's look at some screens. So I already said I worked at DUO. I'm just going to call it DUO. That's much easier than the Executive Agency for Education. And this is our website. Seems easy, but behind this website, there are like over 400 applications for students, refugees, people working at schools to deal with their business with the government. And of course, when making a website like that, you have to test with a lot of users. So we went to schools, public spaces, we met people at their homes, invited them to their offices, and you get used to student language, And I also noticed that I've been using this slide since 2017 and nobody's on Facebook anymore. So I might have to update this slide. But before that website, we had this one. And as you can see, it has a bit of a different taxonomy. The website that we have now is more, categorized into topics, more task-oriented. And this one was more user-oriented. But it also had a lot of problems. For example, it had a lot of double content. So when people used Google to find their information, they ended up in the wrong part of our website. Okay, so now it gets interesting because before that website, we had this one. So this is more like, can we already call this a retro design? Can we do that? Very packed with information. Of course, very nice sidebar with, I'm not sure what a strategy was there. I think it was like everything we don't have room for on another place, we can put there. This one is from 2005. This was actually my website when I was a student in the Netherlands and when I applied for student finance. Well, this is from the Wayback Machine, so don't look at our payment is just going to be in it. That's like, if you want to make students crazy, you have to do that. Here's another great one. I think it's from the late 90s. But I'm just basing that on like the colors and maybe on the piercing from the guy there. Not sure. But okay, this is my favorite. The first website DEO had, and I must say DEO was one of the first governmental organizations in the Netherlands who had their own website. And it was amazing. They didn't make it themselves. They asked like this fun, new, hip bureau, this design agency to design it for them. And there's no way you ever get that much design freedom anymore for a governmental agency, but this was the website. I mean, I could talk the entire talk about this website. This is amazing. The poker chips. Have you seen the poker chips? Like this virtual counter there in like the mouth. What a gem. Okay, but of course I'm not gonna talk 40 minutes about this one. So back to my introduction. Beside my job as a user researcher at DEO, I also did a design research project called the Compassionate Civil Servant. In Dutch, we call it de begripvolle ambtenaar. I photographed my colleagues working in digital government as a compassionate civil servant. I wanted to speak with them about how we make government and how we give users a role in our work. 2 years ago, when the corona crisis started, I helped the Ministry of Health to develop one of the first Dutch corona apps, the Corona Melder, the app we use to do contact tracing. And last year, I worked at the National Ombudsman as a research leader. And the National Ombudsman doesn't do a lot about digital government, and we don't have developers in our organization. But working there, I wanted to zoom out a bit and to learn about, the interaction between citizen and government, and just learn more about the entire relation and what happens around it. So I did a lot of projects about the consequences of the gas extraction in Groningen. I'm going to talk about that a bit later on in the presentation as well. I researched social aspects of the energy transition, and yeah, a couple of that kind of projects. Right now, I'm working on a project about transparent government algorithms, and I'm also cooking up a new project I hope I can start this fall. So, so 3 years ago, I did an experiment in Rotterdam. You see me here standing there. And I tied a yellow rope around my waist, and I asked people, how do you want to be connected to the government? I am the government. And I just asked random strangers, and as you can see, some people came very close. Maybe this guy came a bit too close into my personal zone, but that's okay. And others stayed very far away. For example, this woman. Maybe it's like she's a woman, he's a man, I'm not sure. No, but in every conversation I had with these people about government and what they expected is that they said they hoped government would understand them and would understand their situation. And also when things would get rough for them, that government would show some compassion. And this picture, for me, it shows a lot of the complexity from the stories that I heard. Because when you, if we make it very simple, we just go back to the basics. In all my work, this principle is leading. How can we, as a governmental organization, how can we as government have a compassionate connection with citizens? But there's a strange thing with this. It's almost like a mathematical formula, but it's a strange thing happening here. Because, of course, citizens are just humans. It's like we are all citizens. But the government has become a computer. A lot of people still think as government, as you can, in Holland, you get your bike and you ride to the building where the government is, and you can just, get a number, get in line, and then you can speak to someone and he will push some paper, maybe stamp something for you, and that's, your experience with government. But that's almost never the case anymore. Instead, you go to websites, you log into portals, you fill out online forms, you receive your confirmation by email, You receive money or you pay money, or maybe it goes automatically and you don't even have to do anything. And only when things go wrong, you start looking for someone to call. But then you discover that's not so easy anymore. And if you do call, maybe you have to wait in line for 40 minutes before someone picks up the phone. But of course, this computer, we call government, is made by humans. Your typical government official isn't someone at a desk pushing paper anymore. It's someone working in IT, a developer or a designer. It could be someone like you. And also, this is our national ombudsman where I worked, Reinier van Zutphen. He also notices in the complaints he gets from citizens, because maybe it's good to say, if something goes wrong with you and the government, you go to this man and he's going to try to speak to the government about it and be like a middleman for it. And he notices that in all the complaints he gets from citizens, that government has become a machine, but also he continues to say that we have been building systems that are not doing the right thing anymore. So these humans on both sides, they rarely talk to each other. Citizens have almost never personal contact with government officials, but also government officials hardly ever leave their offices and get to talk with citizens anymore. They hardly ever go to meet citizens to ask for feedback or to just talk to one of their users and ask, how are you experiencing what I've been making for you? And it shows. This is part from a series of drawings I did with some students about how they feel about their relation with Duo and how they felt about their student debt that has been, building up as they've been in a relationship with us. And this is what I drew. So for our English speakers, it says toekomst, that means future. And Duo is like the evil man with like the bridge who took it away. And there it says schuld, that means debt. So it's like Duo is pushing you into the debt. So I wanted to know what happens if we reconnect makers and users in the organization. So I did the same experiment with the yellow rope I used in Rotterdam, and I invited the colleagues of some of our main users. So you see here Brit, and you see my colleague Ineke. And Ineke is the product owner of duo.nl, the website I showed earlier. And we asked the same question, but this time to Ineke, how do you feel connected to a student? And this is her answer.
Oké, het gaat tussen mij en de klant en de student. Hoe dicht sta ik erbij?
In mijn werk zijn.
In mijn werk, oh. Niet zo dichtbij als ik zou willen.
Nu zover.
Ik spreek zelf met echte klanten, dus ja.
Dus daarom staat het zover.
Daarom zou ik het liefst wel dichterbij zou staan.
Hoe dichtbij zou je willen?
Nou, ik wil bijna hier.
Ja? En waarom?
Omdat ze voor mij zijn ze... Nou, ik mag niet zeggen dat ze belangrijker zijn dan OCW, maar ik vind ze wel bijna op dezelfde plek staan. Als het gaat om te weten hoe ik ze het beste kan helpen en om te weten van hoe ze hun informatie kunnen vinden en om ervoor te zorgen dat ze de dingen die ze nodig hebben, dat ze dat gewoon kunnen vinden, maar dat ze ook niet heel lang hoeven te wachten, bijvoorbeeld aan de telefoon of dat het portaal niet doet. Dus ik zou het gewoon fijn vinden dat onze service die we aan die klant geven, dat het gewoon soepel gaat.
Oké.
Ja, dus daarom zou ik zelf wel dichterbij willen staan. Ja.
So she would rather be more close to Brit. But I think it's really interesting because while she says that, she doesn't look at Brit. She talks about the client, but it's like Brit is right there. It's not the client. It's not a like Jane Doe client. It's like this girl is standing here. So I also know that Ineke was really uncomfortable doing this exercise. And I asked her if I could use her clip in rooms like this. And that was okay by her. Just don't worry that I'm not even making her more uncomfortable by it. But she was really uncomfortable by the experience of speaking to a student herself in maybe one of the first times and having to answer these difficult questions. And also, I'm not sure if you noticed, when Milo, that was the guy who asked the questions, he was also a student, I was just the observer there. When he asked, why would you want to be closer? She said, well, because, well, I can't say that they are more important than the ministry, but... And I thought that was really interesting. Why can't we say that? I did this experiment with a lot of my colleagues, as you can see. And everybody had a different approach, a different idea, a different way of visualizing that. And my hypothesis was that the further away someone works from the interaction level, the more distance they would experience. But that was not at all the case. Everybody answered their question based on who they were, on how they were as a student themselves, how they value things in life, and just based on how they looked at the world themselves. And that's really, I think that's really logical, because according to Marlene Sticker, she writes in her book, The Internet is Broken, technology is not a higher power, nor a deity. It is not something that arises by itself. It's a cultural artifact. Technology is people work. We design technology. It reflects our cultural and political values. So it matters what choices are made when developing technology, and it matters who's behind the drawing board. So it matters who we are and how we impact what we make. So I wanted to know, how do we make the digital government? So this is like, we try to work agile in government, but actually when you look at it, we start with this like big waterfall, and then at the end, when we do some development, we have like this little bit of agile. And I just started to write every department and every type of work, and how does it all connect to each other. And then I asked these colleagues, one from every department, so can we talk about this? Can we talk about how you make your decisions and how much of your decisions are based on understanding of citizens themselves? And this is how I did that. This is of a photo interview with Sean. And this is what happened.
Denk je dat je speciale, je hoort soms ook bij sommige banen, dat je een bepaalde mindset moet hebben om het werk te kunnen doen? Denk je dat dat bij jullie vak ook zo is?
Je zet me in ieder geval even aan het nadenken. Ja.
En wat zou er dan onderdeel van die mindset kunnen zijn?
Nou, ja, stressbestendigheid, een hele belangrijke. Ja, en wat mensen dan, dat verschilt per persoon, maar in zekere mate van creativiteit heb je nodig.
Dit was voor mij de laatste weer.
Ja.
Nou, toen dacht ik zelf van, oké, dit zetten we iets te veel in scène. Dus
Precies.
ik merkte dat je blik niet meer authentiek was.
Ja.
Dat was hier eigenlijk.
Ja, dat klopt. Kun je vragen stellen.
Nou, en toen ging je weer nadenken.
Ja.
En dat begon, hier moest je nog een beetje van mij nadenken. En
Ja.
dat begon
Zoekende.
hier eigenlijk. Hier
Oké.
ergens stelde je die vraag op je mindset.
Ja, precies. Nu begon ik na te
En die
denken.
begon je na te denken. Nou, hier, ja.
Oh. Oef.
Wat vind je ervan vanaf
Ja,
hier?
vanaf hier even kijken.
Ja.
En ook weer vijfjes geven, hè?
Ook weer vijfjes geven. En,
Ja. Deze is natuurlijk wel grappig, maar...
Ja, nou, maar die mag erbij hoor. Want
Ik
ik gebruik
geef hem
meerdere
even een
foto's
vijf.
om
Ja,
het verhaal te
daarom.
vertellen. Dus dat is prima.
Ik vind deze wel leuk, omdat het ook... Zo zit je er vaak bij als analist.
Ja.
Van,
Ja.
het is gewoon echt... Dit is echt, wat mij betreft, een typische houding voor mij als analist.
Oké.
Maar en ook met betrekking tot empathie.
Ja.
Nou ja, wat je
Ja.
al hebt. Dat je ziet bij die
Ja.
uitspraak ook van... empathie voor een ambtenaar. Daar,
Dat is...
Ja, dat is dit. Hallo zeg. Even een andere
Oké.
vraag. Volgende vraag, zeg maar. Dat is zo'n
Ja.
gevoel.
Ja.
Ja, dus die vind ik wel heel erg typerend.
I collected more of these stories, and I arranged them in what I call the relay race, from law to counter, which sounds much better in Dutch. It's called the estafette van wet naar loket. I call it this because, everyone does like a small part and gives like the stick to the other one. And together we bring this law to the citizen. And these black arrows are how it normally goes in government. It's like, so all these photos is like the executive agencies, and then we bring that to the citizen. And of course, we have this democratic process in our country. So every 4 years, sometimes 2 years, it happens. We vote and we choose who we want to represent us. They form a parliament together. Our ministries are making policy. And then, of course, we execute these policies and we bring them back to the citizen. And so we continue. But I think we need to change that. And I think we need more of a two-way street. And that is because in all these interviews that I talked with my colleagues, I noticed that we have a lot of dark patterns in the way we make digital government. I finished this project with a website called debegripvolleambtenaar.nl. And you can read through all these stories of my colleagues here. But of course, this is a really strange project, what I did, because actually, when you look at government, it's more like this. And in Dutch, we call this the ambtenarenapparaat. How do I translate that? It's more like the civil servant device. I'm not sure. And, in the Netherlands, we have this idea that civil servants can be anonymous. We're not even people. We're just devices making the government. But of course, that's not true. But if you look at government right now, we have all these anonymous profiles of what roles are there in the government. For example, we just saw Jean, a business analyst. This is what he does. But actually, he is Jean, a person. And the way he does his work impacts the way who he is impacts his work. And what I notice is in all these stories, and I have them here, you can do my research with me, and highlight them. You can find these dark patterns. In Dutch, I call them onbegripvolle patronen, but dark patterns is way cooler, I think. And you can see that a lot of these things, a lot of these patterns is what everyone struggles with in government. For example, the first one is about our relationship with citizens. It's really hard to really distinguish where does my responsibility end as a government organization and starts for the citizen. For example, in the interview of, let's see, Elian, can I make it a bit bigger? He says, it's in Dutch, but I'll translate it. He says, I'm a designer, I make a digital service, and a student has to make a choice to apply for a student loan. So, is it my responsibility what choice he makes? I think not. But as a person, I really am against these big student loans. So should I make it easy to apply for student loans? Because accessibility, and we need good user experience, and we need easy to apply for services from the government. But as a person, I'd rather have it really hard to apply for student loans because I don't think it's a good idea. And how do I, as a designer, know how to deal with such a dilemma? And I also notices four dark patterns. One is we struggle with our own humanity. There's not a lot of room for who we are in government, as we should be anonymous and opinionless and etc. That is, for example, why Mechtelt wanted her portrait in black and white, because she cannot. I'm not sure how to translate that. In Dutch, it's like, ik kan geen kleur bekennen. I cannot confess to my colors. We don't have good overviews. We don't know how things connect because we have everything so separated and everybody's just doing a small part. When you apply for student finance, it's like a minute work, but it's more than 10 teams behind that have to deal with everything so you can apply for student finance. And of course, the last one, we're afraid things might get political if we speak up, if we say something about it. If you want to know more, I wrote all these essays about it, so you can go more in depth. I published these essays At the same time, I was asked to help build the Corona Melder app. And I just thought, this is going to change government because now we know what our dark patterns are. We know how to deal with them. We know how to, change them. But as we heard yesterday, people don't like change. And after I did my work at the Corona Melder app, I bought myself a boat, to just paddle, to work through that. Because it put me down a little bit, that we know what's wrong. We know how things are, or how things can be messy in government, but still it's really hard to change that. And at the same time, I think most of you have heard that because it's also in the international news. The child benefit scandals in the Netherlands started to appear a lot in the media. And when I just published these essays, our parliament held public hearings to investigate what really happened. And while I was in my boat, I listened at them. Shouldn't have done that. I got even more upset. Because, in short, our tax office used biased algorithms in the execution of childcare benefit. A lot of parents ended up in debt and very tough personal problems because of that. And also, the majority of these victims were had a non-Dutch background, and a lot of them were people of color. And in the beginning, a lot of governmental agencies just thought that's just the tax office, it's not about us. But it is. And together with one of the victims, a mother, Jeanette Ramessar, I made a timeline from her story. And this is a project we did together. We took 10 years of her life and we just documented everything that happens first at the tax office, but then how it, spiraled out of control. Because the government uses automated decisions. We use data from other organizations, we combine them, and you get entangled up in all these organizations and you lose totally control. So people like Jeanette did not only have problems with the tax office, she got entangled in her entire relationship. So I wanted to know more about that. And from Jeanette, I learned you never have just one relationship with one organization. Your connection with government is complicated and is a lot. So for a month, I tracked every interaction I had, big or small, that I myself experienced with governmental organizations. It resulted in a big mapping. For a month, I tracked this relationship, and it started to look something like this spaghetti. I have the link online, so you can check it out for yourself. But what I did was I wanted to know, okay, so what happens in my life? What happens in the systems? What type of organizations are above that? And what are our societal values that were the starting point of that? So this first layer is like your classic customer journey. I shouldn't have explained that very much. And I'm going to use one, what happened this is like the 1st of November. And I forgot that I had to do my taxes. So that sucked. That was like what it started for me. And then I wrote down, okay, what are the tasks I have to do then, at the government organization to, well, maybe the tasks more in general. So I have to, do I have to go to my Moneybird account and, do my receipts in order. I'm always late with that. And then I have to go to the portal of the tax office and do the taxes themselves. And of course, the government calls this goal like, you need to do taxes because you're also working for yourself. And then I looked up, okay, so what are these systems above that? What are the technical systems, maybe the portal, but also behind that? And of course, this is not really complete because a lot of them I didn't know. But at this point, it's an interaction with it's called the Middelensysteem, BTW, where you do taxes. And behind that, I was like, okay, but what departments, what teams are making this? Can I figure that out? And of course, it's from the tax office. That's part of the Ministry of Finance. We do this whole thing because it's the law on the Dari taxes from 1968. And of course, that's because we agree here in the Netherlands that we want to share. We have like this shared belief of welfare that we need to have equally shared. So I did this for a month. Not sure if no, we're not going to go through it all. But I learned a lot about this, and I think it was also a lot of work. But I think what I learned from this is how entangled everything is. And I posted it online on my blog, and I got a lot of reactions, mostly from civil servants themselves, that they were amazed how complex this was. And I also learned from, for example, I have here something from the tax office is coming back like 3 or more times in this month. So it was not really a good month. But even people from the tax office themselves that didn't know that things were connected within their own organization, you know. So it's like also when you're part of this, what do we call it, system, you're not sure how it all is connected to each other. So IDEO uses three lenses, you know. I'm sure you're familiar with him. And I spoke to Jasper van Kuik from the TU Delft, and a couple years ago he added a fourth lens, societal. So when we make these technologies, when you really want technical innovation that's good for humans, you need not only look at it from a technical approach, you need not only look, is it feasible? You also need only to look, is it viable, but also, is it desirable? And of course, is it responsible? So when we start mapping this at this month of my own relationship with government, I think maybe we could divide it like this. And we could see, you know, we start with what kind of society do we want? And we translate these ideas, these values into laws and regulations. And then we start, okay, how are we going to execute these things? You know, how are we going to organize ourselves? How are we going to organize our country so we can make what we want, make it happen? And then, of course, when we have an idea of the processes and the organizations that we want, we actually have to build these things and we're going to make it. And then, of course, did we make it right? Did we make the good things? And how are people experiencing that? And in a perfect way, I think, is the layer of what happens in the real life also the output for a new way of looking. Is it still what we as society wanted in the first place? And for the last 10 minutes, I want to show you a case of something that's been happening in the Netherlands. And it's about a project I've worked, I did research to in the last year. It's about a subsidy which people in Groningen could apply for when they experienced consequences from the gas extraction. So this is a topic that's not often in the news as a problem from digital government, but I'm going to make it so. This happened in January. There were these really long lines in front of almost every local government in the north of the Netherlands. You know, people holding their files. And this picture is really like, it's giving me a cringe, but these waiting lines were nothing compared to the online waiting lines, where people who didn't want to go to an office logged in and had to wait all day in a waiting line to apply for this subsidy. But first, what actually am I talking about when I talk about consequences of gas extraction? So in the 1960s, the government, together with Shell and Exxon, found out that in the north of the Netherlands, there's a lot of natural gas. So of course, we're going to use that as a main energy source for the Netherlands. But this is like the really short story. If you want the bigger one, I have like books and everything you can read. But one of the consequences of that was that earthquakes start emerging, and they happened more than the others. And Cor Dwarshuis is an information designer, and he is actually Groninger himself, and he made this animation of all these earthquakes and what happened.
En ergens denk je dan van ja, 2,7 op de schaal van Richter, dat klinkt niet heel heftig. En toch is het wel zo. Dus laten we even checken hoe dat dan zit. Waarom is een aardbeving van 2,7 op de schaal van Richter in Groningen heftiger dan bijvoorbeeld in Zuid-Europa? We bellen even met Laszlo Evers, seismoloog van het KNMI. Goedemorgen.
Goedemorgen.
Goedemorgen. Ja, laten we als eerste maar met het antwoord op die vraag beginnen. Hoe kan het dat het in Groningen zo heftig voelt?
Ja, er zijn eigenlijk 2 redenen voor. Eén, de bevingen vinden ondiep plaats, op ongeveer 3 kilometer.
Dus boringsdiepte is dat dan, denk ik, hè?
En dat is de diepte waarop gaswinning plaatsvindt, inderdaad. En het tweede is dat Groningen, en ook het grootste deel van Nederland, een vrij slappe ondergrond heeft.
Ja, dus op die manier voelt het bij ons veel heftiger dan wanneer bijvoorbeeld in Zuid-Europa in een rotsgrond plaatsvindt, zo'n aardbeving.
Ja, in rotsgrond en bevingen zijn daar ook vaak een stukje dieper dan hier in Groningen.
Sinds 1986 zijn er in Groningen meer dan 1000 aardbevingen geweest. 15 daarvan hadden een kracht van 3 of meer. Dat zijn flinke bevingen. Dat komt doordat ze niet zo diep plaatsvinden, op zo'n 3 kilometer. Natuurlijke aardbevingen zitten veel dieper, op 10 kilometer. Dan zit er een veel dikkere laag aarde bovenop die de schok kan dempen. Aardbevingen veroorzaakt door gas hebben dus veel meer gevolgen. Lees schade.
All right. So, a lot of damage. These earthquakes lead to crack and other damages in buildings. They make it unsafe to live in houses. They make it unsafe to be in public buildings. And of course, in the last couple of years, these earthquakes got even more in volume. And the government started to attract that whole operation and to refund everything to itself. So that means a lot of services, a lot of organization is happening. And also part of these damages can be that almost 25,000 buildings need to be strengthened or rebuilt to cope with these earthquake damages. So this is a photo from Nicole, whose house just got torn down to start rebuild it. So let's do an exercise together in the last couple minutes. When we want to put these layers on top, we can look through a societal lens. We see the need for safety, future perspective, and a lot of funding. For example, this subsidy. So let's see how we can organize that. So in Groningen, these are all the organizations dealing with earthquake damage. Actually, this is a map from 2 years ago. It has changed already. So I'm not going to have the ambition to explain all that to you for now. Let's just make it like this. And of course, SNN, that is the organization who was responsible for dealing with its subsidy, isn't even on this because it's a new organization. It's like a cooperation of local government with the province. So it's like a organization within organizations. Let's just stick it with this. So a recovery operation like this has a lot of money flows. One of them was the regulation that you could apply for 10,000 euros. And that subsidy was for citizens who live in a specific area, who have proof of earthquake damage. So that meant that you should have applied for earthquake damage by another organization so you could prove it. But were not part anymore of the original strengthening program. So you were like an in-between group. And a lot of these people have been unsure on what was about to happen to their homes. There was a lot of talk of safety norms, so they were really stressed. So that happened to these kind of waiting lines, but also these kind of waiting lines. And most of them applied online. They knew there wouldn't be enough money to begin with for everyone. So some of them even, prepared 2 or 3 devices to log in just to know they could be on time. And some people found out that when someone shared their screen online, out of frustration, look at how long I'm waiting. You could see a visible URL. I'm not sure if you already know where I'm going, but if you copied that, you could seal their spot. And then smart people figured out that you don't even need to have a URL, but you could just experiment with these URLs and you could hop front or back in the waiting line. But when it was your turn and you had the same number, other people just, anyway. Of course, it led to these kind of disappointments. Someone at place 30,800 just waited from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon and just got thrown out of the waiting line. Let's look at the actual form. Not sure what to. Not sure if I need to say anything, or we could just look at it. But let's do a quick walkthrough. First, you start with a quick scan. Some questions about your house, if you're the owner, blah 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 blah. Then there's some in-depth questions, which are actually the same questions as the quick scan, I think. So time to start with the application, fill in your personal information. After that, you want to know about the costs of the measures that you took. Then you have a lot of these attachments that you need to upload. Also notice the verplicht ja, that's like the required fields. Not sure why they made it like that. And also it's confusing, like you can skip it and send, can you skip it and send the application like this? Or what would happen, It's like, it can be a little bit confusing. But then you go to the next page, you can check everything and you can apply for that. So one of my friends sent me this screenshot, and she actually is a UX designer herself. But she said, even as comfortable with digital applications as she is, she was very stressed because what if I make a mistake and I get thrown out, Do I have to start again? That's not going to happen because I waited 10 hours to come here. So I think it's fair to say that the user experience is very bad. If the styling is bad, well, I'm not an expert on that, but if you want, maybe we have some drinks upstairs so you can cope with that. But a lot of people also had these problems, My attachment was more than 5 MB and it was too big, but I don't know how to fix that, so no subsidy for me. So I get on and on through that, but it's like, if I have to make it really easy, it's like that. But a lot can go wrong. And in their own internal evaluation, because that report was already out, they said a lot of these things. What can we learn from this? They said, well, obviously this went really wrong. Policy and execution were not good enough connected. We had budget shortening. We had short time to prepare. We had this announcement in December that there was going to be more gas extraction and everybody was stressed. We had bad project management. We didn't have enough time to test the software. Ouch. So if you look at it, it's more like this, it's on all levels, you can feel like that. But when you look at these dark patterns, we forget that if we want to fix these things, we need to have better overviews. We need to work together with our citizens. I can't believe it if someone told me they even tested that form with users. Even if you just asked 5 people, how would you fill in this form? How would you cope with a waiting line? They would have learned something. But I don't think that they did. And it's really hard to do these things and everybody points to another. But remember, we sometimes say so easy, we can't get political. We just make the form, we just make this thing. But I think that when we work in tech, in development, we are one of the closest persons to that relation. So why do we say things like we cannot say they're more important than the minister? They are. So I'm going to leave with this. I'm not sure if you know Mike Montero. He's really a straight guy. He writes in his book, Ruined by Design, that the world is exactly how we designed it. It's fucked. And he calls designers gatekeepers. He says designers, developers, they are responsible for the gate. I think in government, designers and developers making these digital projects, making a form like that, they are the gatekeepers. We're not designing a form, we're designing a perverse waiting line. So when you're working in digital government, you should always be aware you're making the connection. So that means you need to be a gatekeeper. And it means that you have to get to know the other, work together, show moral leadership, zoom out, get the whole picture. And don't mind if it gets political, because it already is. Speak up, show some responsibility. Because when you work as a designer or a developer, you work in politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maike. I'll invite you to the conversation chair. We have time for one question, and I'll just ask it. Somebody asked, so speaking to a room full of developers, do you have any suggestions on how developers can improve their societal impact? As like to what you closed off with, right? We have an opportunity. So how do you suggest we do this?
Well, I think it starts with not, saying I'm just a developer. I think that developers might even be more political than our members of parliament, because we make these things and we should ask for feedback at users, but we also should give these feedback back in our organizations and to our members of parliament. So I think that we have a responsibility to be the gatekeeper there and to not only focus, it's really nice to just make things and make it smaller. And, I'm just making this and I'm not responsible for everything else. But I think that this is the starting point of discussing everything else. Yeah.
All right. If you have any more questions, I'm sure Maike will be available to talk to you, because this has been a very insightful topic. I think a lot of people would like to digest and think about all of this that we honestly normally don't think about. It's heads down. I built the thing and move on. So thank you so much for this
You're
talk.
welcome.